These 8 mistakes are slowing your geometry improvement and keeping you from reaching extreme demons. It took me 7 years to go from the official levels to extremes because I made them. Once I fixed them, I improved way faster and beat my first extreme. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what those mistakes are and which ones are slowing your improvement the most. We'll start with the mistakes that slow down almost every new player. Then we'll move into the mistakes that keep people stuck on demons. Finally, we'll cover the mistakes that stop most players from ever beating their first extreme demon. One of the biggest mistakes new GG players make is picking random levels to improve and choosing levels that won't boost their skill. I remember choosing what official levels I should complete to improve my skill on mobile. I picked levels that I felt like doing and never actually thought if they would increase my skill. And the problem with that is you could slow down your improvement if you choose levels that are way harder or easier than your current skill level. To fix this, complete official levels in difficulty order and do full practice runs to get a good idea of how hard the levels are. Now that you're choosing the right levels, you'll have a nice, well-rounded skill set while beating the official levels. But even if you choose the right levels, you're not going to beat them if you practice incorrectly. Which is mistake number 2. Which is arguably one of the worst things to do at the skill level. Back then, I barely used practice mode to beat official levels, and it took me so long to beat each level. When I did, I just mindlessly grinded the level with no strategy. And the same will happen to you if you don't practice correctly. You'll waste hundreds of attempts grinding the same level, making very little progress, and eventually lose motivation. If you want to practice right, it's actually really easy, but it requires you to turn off auto checkpoints. You need to learn how to place your own checkpoints early from when you get to demons. Open up your level in practice mode and practice the beginning. Then place a checkpoint in the first game mode switch and practice it. And go to your next game mode switch and do the same while doing each part for around 50 to 200 attempts. Repeat this process until you get to the end. This will be your baseline of how you'll practice levels. After fixing these 2 mistakes, you won't struggle beating official levels and get huge amounts of skill completing them. Once you reach demons, however, things start to get way more complicated. Not mastering the art of practice at the skill level is one of the most common mistakes players make. I remember beating my first easy demons. When I got to medium demons, I could not complete any, simply because I didn't learn to practice. And the problem with that is that it will take way too long to beat demons. You won't gain much skill and you definitely won't know how to practice extremes. So here's a simple framework to follow when practicing demons. The first strategy is to do 2 to 5 auto checkpoint runs. Open up your level in practice mode and turn on auto checkpoints. And play until you get to the end, repeating this process for a maximum of 5 times, which is enough to completely learn the level. The second strategy is placing checkpoints in each game mode switch, then practicing them. Go in your level and make sure auto checkpoints is off. In player level, placing checkpoints in each major game mode switch. Hit the replay button, practice, delete checkpoint, practice, replay, delete checkpoint, and so on and so forth until you reach the beginning. Now that you've mastered the art of practice, you might actually be using it too much. You've probably heard start post switcher a million times, but I'm guessing you barely use it. I cannot emphasize how important it is to learn this method for when you reach extremes. I beat my first medium demon without start post switcher, and I beat my first hard demon with it. I gained huge amounts of skill and it even let me move up to Cataclysm, and we'll talk about jumping later. When you use start post switcher, demons will become much easier. If you want to master it, use these strategies. The first strategy is to get a copyable of your level and place start positions in major game mode changes and in different sections. Start by practicing your last start position at the end until you're consistent. Then move to the previous start pose, then the next, and the next. Repeat this process until you get to your level's beginning. This process is called practicing front to back, and this strategy is the baseline of every demon you'll complete. The second strategy is pretty much the same as the first, but instead of practicing individual sections and going back, you'll want to practice sections and go to the end. For example, you'll get runs like 80 to 100, 60 to 100, 40 to 100, and so on. You should also use this method for extremes. After fixing these mistakes, beating demons will feel less challenging and more consistent. But beating levels too easy is actually a problem. Mistake number 5 is not challenging yourself enough. Taking it easy after beating demons and never pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. I used to think that you didn't need to challenge yourself until insane and extreme demons. The problem is that the skills required for extremes don't suddenly appear when you reach them. You build them long before. But you don't try those demons because you think they're way above your current skill sets. If you want an easier way to find levels that challenge yourself, you can use the GDDP website to find hundreds of demons. And you can move up from beginner to bronze to silver and so on. You can also complete some of the bonus packs and monthly packs to challenge yourself even further. You can download the GDDP Geode mod linked in the description. These resources are specifically designed to set up your skills for success. If you fix these mistakes, you'll have a substantial increase in skill and you'll beat most demons above your skill level. But even if you fix these mistakes, you won't be able to beat extremes. Extreme demons aren't just harder, they need a completely different approach to improving. Remember when I said we'd come back to jumping? Most players get it wrong here. Jumping is one of the most controversial topics in the Geometry Dash community. Some players swear by it, others say you should never do it. Last year, I jumped from Psychosis, a hard demon, to Cataclysm. It took me nearly 10,000 attempts, and even after beating it, I still didn't feel prepared for levels like Bloodbath or Accu. The problem is that jumping simply isn't good or bad. Done correctly, it can massively accelerate your improvement. Done poorly, it could waste thousands of attempts and kill your motivation. So how do you know when a jump is actually worth it? This is the 1 to 10 scale I came up with. And you're gonna rank how hard it was to beat your last hardest from 1 being free to 10 being extremely difficult taking ages, based on attempt counts, completion time, choke point difficulty, and overall how hard the level was. Let's say you rank your last hardest as a 3. If this hardest was a medium demon, feel free to jump to hard demon or even insane demon. Because this level was so easy to complete, you're able to quickly move up in difficulty. If you ranked your last hardest in something like 8 however, you should ideally stay in that skill range for a couple more levels. For example, if this level was the Nightmare, you'll probably want to beat levels like Is or Speed Racer for example before moving up in difficulty. And be sure to use this scale when moving up to extreme demons. After understanding this, you'll know exactly which levels will improve your skill and what extremes you want to push for. But there's still 2 major mistakes stopping most players from beating their first extreme. Now that you're using Start Post Switcher, you might skip choke points because you think they're too difficult, or that there's no need to practice them, which is mistake number 7. If you don't practice choke points, you'll constantly die to them and quickly get unmotivated, which will ultimately lead to you not beating the level. Here's my simple framework of how I practice choke points to almost never die to them. The first step is to watch a showcase of your choke points to learn the gameplay and click patterns. Next, open up your start pose level and practice those parts for around 100 to 400 attempts. If you can't pass a certain part, turn on 0.7 speed hack and practice, then move it up to 0.8. Repeat this process until you're consistent and reach 1.0. I also like to learn and memorize the clicks in each choke point so that I'm able to rely on muscle memory to pass them. You should use this strategy every time you come across any choke points. At this point, you've built the skills for extremes. You've learned what levels to play, how to practice them, and when to challenge yourself. But literally none of this matters if you don't have the right mindset. The hardest but most important mistake to fix is not believing in yourself. Not believing that you can achieve your goals, beat harder levels, and one day be an extreme demon. You probably look at Bloodbath or Succubin and think, I'll never beat that. And you won't if you keep that mindset. I remember playing no clips of those demons and couldn't imagine myself beating them. I thought my chances were literally 0. However, the player who believes in himself will dedicate more time to practice, become more confident, and therefore beat those levels. The difference isn't that extreme demon players are naturally better. It's that they believed they could improve, and kept showing up long enough to become good enough. This video isn't about belief, but here are a few simple things you can start doing today to build that belief. So open up Geometry Dash and go make some progress. These mistakes will help, but they're only the beginning. Watch my previous video for a complete roadmap to your first extreme demon.